Thanks for listening and subscribing to episode 251 of the Clive Barker podcast. This week, Jose and I are joined by a friend of the show and fellow Barker fan, Marcus Williams, to kick off a series of art books, Clive Barker's Imaginer 1 and 2. Okay, well, welcome. This is episode 251 of the Clive Barker podcast, and we've got Marcus.
Hello.
And Jose.
Hey, guys.
And I'm Ryan. And we're going to be talking about Clive Barker Imaginer books 1 and 2.
Yes.
Very exciting. When these projects came out, it was crowdfunded, but now after I think the second book, I think they've no longer been crowdfunded. They've just been moving off of their own momentum, right?
Yeah, the first two volumes were on Kickstarter. And by Thomas Nagovan, and then after he left the project and Phil and Sarah Stokes took over, then they just started doing it on their own on their own website.
Yeah, and using pre-orders rather than Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Which, I think that if Century Guild had continued to make them, they probably would have stayed on Kickstarter every time, because he's a big believer in Kickstarter.
And it would have taken a lot longer to get the project finished. I know. I actually missed the Kickstarter format of these volumes just because you have all these awesome stretch goals. If you go over the original amount of pledging, then you get these perks, and a lot of the perks are really cool, such as they had a couple exhibitions that they put on because they went over, and they had a couple exhibition pamphlets or booklets based on that. So they also came out with notebooks and things like that. Just a lot of cool stuff that you don't get just buying them on the website now.
That's right. I think the Kickstarter stuff was done for 1 and 2. It was both done on the same year. I think it was 2014. And I'm looking at the Kickstarter pages because I pulled them up. Yeah. And I can tell you that for the first volume, there were 451 backers, and they pledged $77,901 for the first book. Like you said, there were some really cool stretch goals, exhibition catalog, exhibition poster, exhibition T-shirt, complete packages, the deluxe edition hardcover. There was a little booklet for Clive Barker's Juvenilia Insomnium, which was these old sketches that Clive had done on with pencil and paper from 75 to 77. Yeah. And you could also get that little booklet about those sketches that were on display in the exhibition. Yeah,
I think Tom had just found them when he was going through the archives at the old Seraphim office, and in the style that Clive did in those days is so vastly different than what he does now.
Absolutely.
It's paying more homage to Jean Cocteau and things like that. I feel like Clive hadn't really found his distinctive style yet in that time. Yeah. But I mean, they are beautiful works though. And so just having things like that are cool. And I miss having that.
And the second Kickstarter, it got, 365 backers. They pledged $59,757 to bring this project to life. So that's how much it costs to make all of these wonderful books and all of the stuff that came with it. And again, there was all these cool packages, pages from Clive Barker's Private Dream notebooks.
And I purchased almost all of those drawings, by the way.
Really?
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So
awesome.
One of the cool things about that, one of my more happier moments was if in the exhibition booklet, my name is betwixt Adam Jones from Tool and then the cast of Hellraiser. So
yeah. There was a little catalog that also mentions me, Ryan, and Rob, and the Clive Barker podcast at the time. And that was so much fun to see that show up in one of those little catalog booklets.
Yeah.
And it was a real honor for them to include us in that as well. But that's amazing that you have these amazing pieces of art. You became not just a fan of Clive by his writing, but by his art, right?
Well, I initially, when I was a kid, I was introduced to the movies. Candyman and Hellraiser, and their sequels were what I watched as a kid growing up. Mm-hmm. Especially Candyman, that was really formative for me. So I always saw the name Clive Barker and just thought he made movies as a kid. And as I got a little bit older, late middle school, early high school, I realized that he wrote books, and then I became immersed in his books. And I didn't grow up in the best neighborhoods, and I didn't have access to the internet or anything like that, so I didn't really know that much about Clive. Mm-hmm. And I just remember reading books of blood. I didn't have the best education, and so I was just entranced by the words because I had no idea what he was saying, but it sounded so beautiful. And that's when I really went down the rabbit hole of Clive, and then later found out that he was an artist and fell in love with his art. And it was because of the Kickstarter that I actually started collecting his artworks, because I got in touch with his art manager at the time, who was Tom from Century Guild.
Yeah.
And just started buying drawings from him and Clive, and then slowly expanded from there.
So you must have visited Century Guild then.
Yeah, I did.
Thomas Nagovin did a great job with these volumes. He's done a lot more books about other artists and other projects that he's done on Kickstarter in the meantime, like Alphonse Mucha, I don't know how to pronounce that.
Yeah, Mucha.
The Pater book looks amazing. But he's done some truly amazing introductions to these books.
Yes.
The first one has some stuff I actually highlighted here on the book. Not on the book itself, of course.
What?
No, but I highlighted it on my notes. Yeah. But there's in the opening, Clive Barker Imaginer, there's some stuff I highlighted here. When I first learned that this man who I knew best as a writer of novels kept a sumi brush next to his bed, not to take text notes of his dreams, but visual ones, I was surprised. Wouldn't a master craftsman of lyrical sentences toss fragments of them around effortlessly as the most clear shorthand of his vision? And it's wow, the whole, this introduction is just so beautifully written, and it just crystallizes and distills so many of the ways that I feel about Clive's art and what it means to me, that it's truly, truly amazing. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, when we went to the Nightbreed premiere, I had Thomas sign my my copy of Imaginer 1.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, just because I don't know, I just felt like he contributed so much, and he made that happen. And I know that there was a falling out and everything, but he was good to us, and I thought it was a really good experience.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, at the time there was kind of a slump of Clive's art being shown to the world, I feel like. And Tom came in, and he really pushed Clive's artwork out of just being in his, at the Seraphim office and out into the world. And he put on a lot of really, really beautiful exhibitions of Clive's work, and, had them framed in these gorgeous frames, and took it to Comic-Con and things like that, and really tried to get the word out that Clive makes these pieces. Seeing the paintings in Abarat or on the internet is one thing, but seeing the paintings in person is beyond mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Before Imaginer, I think the last time that a book had come out with Clive Barker's art, it had been that Rizzoli book, Visions of Heaven and Hell, and that came out in 2005, I think. Yeah. And it was. I mean, at the time, it looked like an amazing book to me, but there were some problems with the book.
Yeah.
Namely, not just physical problems with the book because of the gilded pages that got stuck together for a lot of people. It was a mess. And but also the resolution and the quality of it. Yeah.
The scans were just not up to par. I know there was actually a couple pieces that collectors had already purchased them, and they had the collector take a picture of the painting and then send it over, and that's what they look.
Like, wasn't there a big problem with the Arsonist, right? Like that one.
Yes,
that was the one that had the worst quality photo in there.
Yeah, I remember them calling out on social media. I think it might have been Phil and Sarah or Mark and Tom or whatever. And they were saying, we're trying to get in touch with the person who owns the Arsonist, which is that awesome painting of a guy surrounded by flames. And there's a lot of oranges and reds and vibrant yellows and stuff. And they were trying to figure out who had that because it had been sold, and they wanted so much to include that because it was a painting that Clive wanted to put in the book because he likes it so much. But I guess they never really found out. They never got a chance to actually put a good scan of that. Yeah. But that Rizzoli book, I think Clive mentioned something after the Imaginer book came out. He said that comparing it to the Rizzoli book was like offering someone chalk to eat, and now you had cheese.
It was the difference between the two was chalk and cheese, which is like an English way of saying like night and day.
Yeah.
Right. And I have to say that the way that this we saw that when we were there, like you mentioned, Ryan, when we went to visit in 2014?
14, yeah.
Yeah, 2014.
Right after this book came out.
Yeah, we were at Clive's studio, and I remember we went to the studio, and they had all these like huge professional printers where they did the prints, the Lux prints.
K.
Yeah, James K. of the Transmission Atelier, and they were working on scanning and taking pictures of these wonderful giant paintings because you see them on the page or you see them on the internet on your screen. It's like, oh, that's such a cool painting. But when you see it in real life, these are big canvases.
Yeah, it's jaw-dropping. It really is.
Yeah.
And I have to confess that I didn't mind the quality of Visions of Heaven and Hell because there was nothing to compare it to.
Yeah, no, that's really true. I mean, the first time I saw Clive painting in person was in 2014. I think it was like a week before the screening that you guys attended. There was actually Spectrefest was doing the world premiere of the director's cut of Nightbreed at Cinema Family, the silent movie theater in LA.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And Clive was supposed to attend, and so me and my friends drove down. I live in Sacramento, so it was like a 6-hour drive. And we drove down, and they had a mini gallery exhibition in the back outside, which is shown in Imaginer Volume 2. You can see the pictures in there. We'll get to that later. But that was my first time seeing the paintings in person, and I had always, like, again, seeing pictures and stuff on the internet just doesn't do it justice to stand next to one of them and see the topography and just the layers of the impasto and the knife effects. Thomas Nagovin has a really, really beautiful quote in the opening of the Imaginer Volume 1 where he says, quote, "Outlines and shapes are scratched in as finely as the work of a surgeon's blade with the deliberate force of a butcher. What looks violent and chaotic on the canvas is anything but. Close examination of the work reveals a sense of geometry and composition that is completely primal and as subconsciously pleasing as the very essence of the wildest realms of nature."
That's just glorious.
Yeah, I mean, that's and it really does encapsulate what it's like to see Clive's work in person.
Yeah, I mean, seeing the triptych, and visiting Clive's house back in 2011 was part of what inspired me for this podcast to begin with. I mean, I was just
the beautiful moment.
Yeah, and actually, what we were talking about in the last episode about the Alaska Comic-Con, the person that was a big Abarat fan, she said, "Man, I would give anything to be able to see the triptych."
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, actually, if you go to the website, there's a picture of me standing in front of it.
Yeah.
That was the first picture that you put on the podcast website was a picture of you standing in front of the triptych.
Yeah, because to me it kind of represented my awe and inspiration and feeling like I needed to give something back.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that piece is I think Mark even says in the afterword that is like the grand finale of the tour when the Seraphim tours of the old office is seeing that. And I remember I visited Seraphim because I went to that Nightbreed screening and Clive was not feeling well and he didn't attend to do the Q&A after. Mark actually told me he was like, well, since you're in town, come up to the office and take a tour. Yeah. And so I did. So I was there just probably a few days before you guys. And just seeing the beautiful moment and seeing it on the easels and just the immensity of how large that thing is. You do feel like you can fall into it. And Ben,
just like Cal Mooney falling into the fugue carpet and Weaverworld.
I'm thinking, how long did it take, Clive? And Ben goes, "Oh, Clive said it took him forever. It took him a couple weeks." Oh, that's forever. A couple weeks, eh? Okay.
It's funny that the time that Mark invited me to the office too, and because I said, hey, I owe you lunch or something like that, and he said, well, why don't you come on down to the office? And he gave me the address, and it was a few days before I put it together. Wait, this isn't just an office. This is Clive Barker's house.
Yeah, they're adjacent to each other. Yeah, they were adjacent to each other.
Right. I mean, and I thought it was like the house that he lived in. I didn't realize that at the time Clive had 3 mansions, next to each other. But
yeah.
So when I was there with you, Ryan and Maureen, and another guy from Rue Morgue, if I remember correctly,
Ryan Turek. And then that artist, what was his name? Vance Kelly was with us too.
Okay. So anyway, when I was there, I think I remember James Kay of the Transmission Atelier was down in the studio area, and he was he was working on his computer, and he was really focused on what he was doing. And they had this camera there, and they were taking pictures. I think it was Mater Motley was on the easel.
It was Mater Motley.
It was the one they were taking a very, very heavy, detailed photo of. And according to Thomas Negovan, the capturing the images, they used a high resolution scan back camera with a Hasselblad lens. And it was all carefully lighted. So they had the easel had these lights around it to evenly light the entire canvas. And then after they took the picture, they would bring the digital file, the raw file, onto a computer, and they would look at the canvas in front of them while they were color correcting it on the computer to be able to match it exactly to what you would see, as closely as possible to what you would see if you were actually standing in front of the of the canvas. So that's why all the images in this look so good.
And you'd have to really have a good eye to be able to do that. I couldn't do that.
Yeah, and the resolution is insane. I mean, there's a lot of especially as the Imaginary volumes go on, there's a lot of close-up images where you just essentially zoom in on a section of the canvas to see what it looks like if you were to get up close to it. And I remember
that's a theme they do through all of the books.
Yeah, and I remember Ben Mears telling me that the resolution of what they scan, what they photograph is so immense that you could project it onto the side of a building and it would lose no resolution at all.
Wow!
So you could essentially blow these pictures up greatly, and they would still be as high as they are.
They were crazy amount of megapixels. And I remember at the time they were thinking about, I don't know if this was something that was actually on the works, but I remember Thomas saying something we could do anything with these pictures. We could imagine putting this in a service that would use them as wallpapers in a giant screen in your house on the wall or something.
Oh,
You'd be able to, things like that. I was like, wow, that's a crazy idea. I would love to have that.
Yeah.
I have a smart TV and you can choose to connect it to things like your Dropbox or your Google Photos or something. Yeah. And you can choose to have a slideshow of your photos and turn your TV into a giant basically a giant photo frame.
Yeah.
And it always blows my mind how cool that is when I'm like in the kitchen, and all of a sudden I was watching Netflix or something, and all of a sudden that thing goes into like slideshow, and I'm looking at pictures of myself or pictures that I took and whatever. It's like, oh, that's cool. Imagine if that was like pictures of Clive Barker's artwork showing up on your TV. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
But another thing that Tom mentions in the opening of this book is how closely, like you mentioned, Clive's early works seem to drink from, the Cocteau sketches and stuff like that.
And Blake.
And
Oh,
Blake.
yes.
And I was reading up on Blake, trying to prepare for this podcast, and I found some really amazing descriptions of Blake's work, and one of them says, it was from the Art Story website, says Blake felt that imaginative insight was the only way to cast off the veil thrown over reality by rational thought, claiming that if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. And I think you get this thing from Clive Barker's artwork. You see this world that he creates, and Blake's spiritual vision was very, very central to his creativity, and he populated it with a pantheon of deities, right? Just like Clive Barker creates all these like characters. Blake had like Urizen, Los, Anitharmion, Orc, and Clive Barker, instead of just getting like some few deities, he populated with not just deities, but tribes, species, bestiary of creatures. And Imagine 1 and 2 is very, very dominated by Abarat pictures. So that comes across really well.
Yeah, well, Clive is a conduit. Ben described his mind as it's a pitcher of glass that is always being filled, and if he doesn't pour out the pitcher onto a canvas or in writing, then the pitcher of water is going to overflow, and
Clive described it one time as like there's some divine force that's pouring colored syrups into his head.
Wow. Okay, so that must be where Ben got it from. Yeah. But and like the Seraphim guys even used to nickname Clive's output as being driven by the hand, in that he could never say, "Oh, I'm going to draw an apple." The hand dictates whatever's going to be on the paper. He can't, because I guess. Clive, or they proposed the question to Clive, or Clive proposed the question to them, I'm sorry, of if you wanted me to draw anything, what would you want me to draw? And they all agreed Candyman, because he had never made a Candyman piece. And then Clive kind of just said, oh, never mind, I'm not going to do that. And they go, oh yeah, because the hand, he can't just say, I'm going to draw this. Yeah. It comes to him.
And Candyman would be different things to different people.
Yeah,
so when
that's something that's very, ethereal. It's not, it's not solidified, but
in the movies they crystallize that into Daniel Robitaille, but which is a welcome expansion, and I think it was a successful way of creating a character that would be coherent for the movies. But in real life, in this Forbidden Story, of course, it would show up as different things to different people.
It was a pasty yellow Liverpudlian.
Yeah, but one of the things that describes exactly what you were talking about, how he's driven by this vision, is in the previous episode, we had David here and we were talking about news, and we brought up this blog post about the mural that Clive Barker did one time for this function with Allen Ginsberg, which was the metaphysics of light, wisdom, and sound. And,
which is a shaman, which is
the shaman sitting on an egg, right?
Yes.
So in the old Lost Souls website, clivebarker.com, which is still up, by the way. Hopefully it won't go down anytime soon. I need to download a bunch of pictures from there. But going back to my point, he on the first day of creating the painting, the shaman was squatting on a skull. And then the image changed real quickly because Clive transformed it into an egg. So there you go. It's like sometimes he makes these decisions on the fly, and sometimes things work, sometimes things change, and that's just the way it is when you're doing art. And I want to bring up this little quote here from Cocteau that also kind of describes this. especially when it comes to Clive, because he's an author and a painter.
Yeah.
Cocteau once said, poets don't draw. They unravel their handwriting and then tie it up again, but differently.
Oh, wow.
I just love this. Yeah. It's such a perfect synopsis of this sort of creative effort where you give life to your characters by drawing, and it's at the same time a compliment to the writing.
Yeah, well, the excerpt that you read earlier about the Sumi brush next to his bed is that he dreams and he sees in images, and the images always come first. And, for the first 2 books of Abarat, he just looked at the paintings, and the paintings told him the stories, and the paintings showed him the characters. He wasn't dictating the story. The paintings were dictating it to him. And Abarat 3 was the first time that he actually had to sit down and kind of wrestle this thing into a real narrative and try to figure out where he was going to go with it and not let it be unruly as it was.
And at that point, or at some point, maybe it was during Abarat 2, he decided that it was going to be 5 books instead of 4.
Yeah.
Because the story was expanding so much in his outline or his imagination.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, also 1,500 large oil canvas paintings, to tell the story with.
I wonder how many paintings at the end of the 8th volume they're going to be represented in all these volumes. Because volume 2 is 416 pages or something like that.
And there were paintings in there that I haven't seen anywhere else. Yeah,
well, that's the beautiful thing is the archive on clivebarker.info is really nice, but it's not complete. If I am a Clive Barker enthusiast, especially when it comes to his art, and every single time I think I've seen every painting, a new volume Imaginer comes, and my mind is blown by seeing things that I never, have seen or thought I would see. And when I was talking to Ben Mears in 2014, the second time I went in 2015. I asked if all of the large oil paintings were going to be able to fit in the Imaginer series, and he said, yeah. So we should be having all 1,500s of those. Well, not entirely, because the ones that were sold before they were able to scan them didn't make it in. I have a large oil painting, and I guess I purchased it before they were able to scan it. So mine wasn't able to make it in the volumes. But another thing, the later volumes from, I want to say 6 to 8 are featuring more recent, smaller paper artworks that are like 18 by 24. So they're also going to be including the smaller, more recent pieces that he's also making.
I think that's very important because after Clive's coma of 2010 or whatever it was, and
2012, I think.
Yeah, and the strokes and all that. So his artwork changed a little bit, and it became a little more. He just adapted to it. So he just started drawing in a kind of a different, more scratchy style, but it's still the same visions flowing out of him.
Yeah,
and I want to say you mentioned something about before Visions of Heaven and Hell and the Imaginer books came out that there wasn't a lot of stuff out there with Clive's paintings, and that's true. But there were these, like, I got enamored by Clive Barker's creativity and art through his sketches that I could see in books like the
Illustrator. Clive Barker Illustrator 1.
So the ink, the Sumi ink, and then the pen drawings and things like that.
And a book called Pandemonium that had a bunch of illustrations in it too.
And the other book of nonfiction that came out, Shadows in
Eden.
Yeah, Shadows in Eden. And of course, Thief of Always is full of wonderful drawings.
Yeah, and it has a few Sumi inks. I know the limited edition of Great and Secret Show has a few of them. Those were also released in the comic version.
And then the Lost Souls website, because it was so important. It had all those exhibition photos, and they would put all these dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of photos that are still up there. Yeah. And I remember sitting in my undergrad, sitting on my computer lab, and just visiting, my fingers would immediately go to clivebarker.com, and I would go there and like look at all those paintings, and I'd be like, wow, look at that. That's amazing. And that's how I basically got in touch with Clive Barker's artwork, was through the internet and through those books. And then once we started seeing the more sophisticated, more, oil paintings that Clive Barker started using, started going into oils and stuff like that. And that's when
the books of blood covers were like the first real sophisticated ones that everybody got to see.
Yeah. Which at the time I didn't even know the cover was by Clive Barker. I don't remember being consciously aware that was Clive Barker who had made those covers. I only found that out a few years later, and I was like, oh, wow. Yeah.
But he didn't start truly painting until he was 45. And I know in Imaginer 2, he talks about finding color, because for so long he was just working in black and white and just, the Sumi ink and the pen. So going into painting was a whole new world for him.
Another quote here from Thomas Nagovin in the opening of the first Imaginer. It says, like a father figure who explores the darkness and upon returning leads us through, saying, it's all right, this is the path. We're secure in moving beyond the safety of our boundaries because our guide is a missionary who we can see has returned bearing scars and wisdom and love. And so some of these paintings are kind of scary looking, but some of these characters are not evil, and that's the thing. It's like it's just a way that there's a story behind some of these paintings. There's life for these characters in Clive Barker's artwork and writing, and Thomas calls it contemplating their tales. We experience the Imaginer's most important gift, a map to understanding the deepest parts of ourselves. It's a beautiful opening to this volume.
Yeah, and he calls them shamanistic cave paintings, which I thought was really interesting, and not the first person that's kind of referred to Clive as like a shaman or a conduit. But it's really interesting way of looking at it.
My other favorite quote of Thomas's here is, he says, Barker is equal parts hypersexual Goya and sinister Dr. Seuss.
Dr. Seuss, yeah. Awesome. Then the book moves into pictures of some of the 2014 exhibitions that were going on at the time, which was really important in contextualizing and bringing to the masses all these like wonderful, paintings that were being prepared for Imaginer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of pictures here. There is, I think it's in this book. Oh, here it is. Okay, so what's the page number? I don't know the page number. It's not numbered, but it's ancient Cenobite costume.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
That you can see here. And this ancient Cenobite costume, I think, was this on Adam from Tool collection or something? I think I remember reading something at the time that this might have been in Adam's collection.
I know that he purchased the Princess Breath painting.
Okay.
I don't know about the Cenobite costume. I know that the Cenobite costume was co-designed, I want to say, by Johnny Raymond as well as Clive. Like it was
and wasn't it displayed in something that Kirk Hammett was doing?
That was it. Yeah. That was it. Yeah. That was
Metallica.
it. Yeah. Not Adam from Tool. It was Kirk Hammett, I think.
Yeah, he I know that he has like a huge art show in San Francisco, I want to say, or he had one at the time that I think featured some of Clive's artwork.
And so, can we go back to Princess Breath really quick also?
Yeah.
Thomas describes, and this, to me, I know exactly what he's talking about, having seen Princess Breath was the very first Clive Barker painting he's ever seen. It's like, that was in the waiting room. I sat in there for an hour staring at Princess Breath while I was waiting for Mark to free up, and because he was talking to the guy that was the vice president at the time. I forget his name.
Rob Humphreys?
Rob Humphreys, yeah. And so I waited a long time, and Rob Humphreys was kind of yelling at people on the phone, and so I was studying that, and I was studying the Hellraiser Monopoly board, and the Promethean, or what is that thing called? That sculpture?
Proteus.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, and just all the cool stuff in that waiting room. But I was just blown away looking at Princess Breath and going, oh my God, I'm looking at a real life, like, actual, original painting of Clive's. I can't believe it.
And again, it's got this story behind it, because Princess Breath is this beautiful, red-haired kind of deity or entity that out of her breath are born the creatures that live in the Sea of Isabella and the Abarat. Yeah. So she would breathe out these little octopuses and little aquatic creatures, and then the wind would take them and they would go into the ocean. And it's like, what? That's the kind of stuff that's behind each one of these paintings, whether it's put into words by Clive Barker in a book or whether it's just residing in Clive Barker's head. These are the stories that are behind every one of these characters.
Yeah. And the really nice thing about the galleries is that it takes art out of the elite category, because, just because it seems like the only way that one can see one of these paintings in person, minus an exhibition or, the like, is that you have to purchase it. So, you have all these beautiful paintings that are just being hidden in people's houses and not seen. And that's the one thing that
takes them out of the private spaces and makes them public. Yeah, takes them out of the living room. And puts
really
them in a gallery.
That's what Thomas Nagovin at Century Guild was doing with these paintings at the time.
Yeah.
Although he did describe that this exhibition had like lines around the block and that it was full of celebrities.
Well, Century Guild is a pretty small shop, so makes sense.
I found some more information about the ancient Cenobite costume. Actually, there's some captions here in the book. It says it was created by Clive Barker and Junker Designs.
Okay.
And then I just shared tonight a post that was posted on February of last year.
Yeah. I was going to bring that up if you didn't.
Yeah, which was the Cenobite costume, the ancient Cenobite costume that you can see on Imaginer 1 being modeled by someone. And it was modeled by Vander von Odd in Los Angeles, California. They took some pictures, and it was shot by Glitter Pimp. And the makeup was done by Kat Von D, and there's a lot of stuff in here. Yeah. I posted it on the Hellraiser page, the Hellraiser official page, the Clive Barker page, and I shared it on my Facebook as well. You can see someone in full regalia with the ancient Cenobite costume. It's got this.
It's got looks like a big old mace or club too that he's holding onto.
Yeah, and it's what I think is really interesting about this costume is that it looks like those things that priests wear. Those like usually it's purple and gold, right? They put it on over their shoulders and it drapes down on the front of their bodies. Except this one is red and it's got all the panels of the Hellraiser element configuration.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of like other stuff. There's chains. There's all sorts of stuff hanging from it. So if this is how I see one of the Cenobites that you can read in the Scarlet Gospels, this is what it would look like to me. Yeah. It's a beautiful costume. Go check that out on our podcast page. I shared it, and Vander von Odd modeled it. So fantastic job modeling this beautiful ancient Cenobite costume.
Yes.
The other thing that caught my attention and kind of made me feel a little nostalgic was on page 18, looking at photography on Clive's phone with Thomas Nagovin.
Oh yeah,
and it's like that is so Clive Barker, the very first, the first time I went to Texas Frightmare Weekend, 2011, there was a huge line to see him, and I was in there, and they told me that, and this is another thing that kind of inspired me for the podcast, but they told me, Ryan, you got so much stuff. That why don't you just wait here and hang out with Clive and Mark and we'll just let everybody else in the lines sign and you can just hang out here with us. Mm-hmm. And that was so cool. They made me feel so special. But anyway, in the middle of that line, Clive sent everybody out and had a couple of guys in there, and he just wanted to photograph these guys. So for like an hour, everybody had to get out of the room, and they closed the door, and while Clive was photographing these people, and it just it's just like the muse hits him, and it's like it doesn't whatever else is going on, this is what's happening now.
Oh yeah, when Clive was going through his photography phase.
Yeah.
I wonder if he also maybe used those as references for paintings too.
That could be. Yeah, that totally could be.
Some of my favorite paintings in this book, I got to say, one of them is the 2007 rendition of Pinhead.
Yes.
Which is this very tribal, shamanistic design of Pinhead. Again,
is that in the gallery pages, or is that like the main?
It's page
in the
57.
paintings.
57.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Marcus for the win.
Yeah.
It's well on canvas.
A close-up of his face, on the next page.
Yeah.
I just, you might say, oh yeah, Pinhead, but this painting is like it's all messy and stuff. But that's what I like best about this. It reminds me of cave wall paintings. It almost reminds me of that stuff. It reminds me of like Ghana movie poster, paintings and stuff.
I can see that.
And it's a really cool painting. And this was something I noticed when it was on the 20th anniversary edition of the Hellbound Heart. Is that when you hold it up close, it just looks like chaos. And you have to hold it back a little bit to see the shape of Pinhead and to understand the painting.
Yeah,
exactly.
And I'm sure there's several paintings underneath that painting too, because the impasto is just so thick.
Yeah. And Clive Barker is known to sometimes use the palette knife, and sometimes he paints with a brush, but sometimes he paints with a palette knife, and sometimes he just grabs a canvas that didn't work out, and he'll just scrape it off and paint over it.
Yeah. So I heard there's like 30 pounds of just paint on that Pinhead painting alone.
I believe that. I believe that. In the introduction, Thomas mentions Lewis Williams, which is David Lewis Williams, which is one of the most respected scientists in the field of cognitive archaeology, and he says that he would describe the cave paintings that they were made by Paleolithic shamans who would venture into the deep darkness of the caves and enter into a trance state wherein they would move to the walls and paint the images of their otherworldly visions. And that's exactly what it seems like. This Pinhead looks like someone went into a cave, went into a deep trance, and then just decided to, work. And that's one of the ones. The other one, of course, Princess Breath from 1998.
Well, and then there's and it opens with this Christopher Carrion. That's sort of the opposite in a way of the one we were just talking about, because it's so detailed.
Yeah. It looks like it's probably just maybe 2 layers as opposed to 20 of just the paint and the impasto, and it's more. It's one of my personal favorites, just because it has such an emotional tie to Abarat itself, and
it looks like
getting to see it in person. I mean, they had to drag out a lot of paintings before they could find it for me.
Yeah, that was. I didn't take any pictures when I was inside of Seraphim. Besides taking one with the Pinhead or with the Christopher Carrion painting. It
is a portrait. It seems like it's something that would be in the walls of the palace at Gargasium, right? It looks like that would be what Christopher Carrion would have hanging on his palace at Gargasium. So that feels like it was just snatched out of Abarat from Gargasium and placed on a wall in Los Angeles. And that's wonderful.
That's a really beautiful way to put that.
And there's a couple other ones here that I really like that stand out for me. I mean, they're all beautiful, but really there's 4 or 5 here that are really amazing to me. Pinhead from 2007, Princess Breath from 98, Heartbreak. Heartbreak is the one that's on, let's see.
Oh, I think that's one of Rob's personal favorites.
Yes, he made a Beyond the Limits article for that.
Yes, I remember that.
And I particularly like the interpretation that Rob did for that one, because he said he thought they were 2 brothers, and one of them is trying to grab the other guy's heart and trying to bring some. Yeah.
Did you write down what page that was?
Let's see. I'm trying to go through it real quick.
Heartbreak.
We were going to rely
page 153.
Okay.
There we go.
That's on page 153. Heartbreak. Of course, everyone can look at this and come up with their own interpretation. Rob's interpretation was that there are 2 brothers, and one of them is trying to console the other because the other one is heartbroken. I could look at this and see someone. I don't know. It's a very personal thing. I mean, you have to stare at it for a while. You can't just come up with something on the fly.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about Clive Barker's paintings. You can look at them one day and they show you one thing, and then you can look at them another day and you get a completely different read of it. And
that's the beautiful thing about art.
Yeah, and the other one I also like is Fire Dancer.
Yes.
Yeah, I Fire Dancer moves me in a way I can't explain.
The composition in that piece is really beautiful.
It's in page 177.
Because it most of it is blue, with the exception of the highlights of the reflected flame of the fire on the dancer hopping over.
And it reminds me of some photography that Clive has done in the past, some photography that you can see in that book with stuff like that. With David Armstrong.
Yeah, what is that book
Forbidden
called?
Flesh.
Yes.
Yeah. There's a picture of Clive around the bonfire where he's raising his arms up like he's invoking something.
Yeah.
And you see that game of light and the shadows behind him in the night, and then the fire in front of him. And this is kind of what reminds me of that. It's just a Walpurgisnacht kind of painting. It feels like he's gonna mount a broom and he's gonna start flying away. You know?
Yeah, it has a very Goya quality to it.
Yeah, like Goya's Caprices and stuff like that. Except not a sketch, but an actual painting. You see these like blackbirds flying in the back, and this fire, and all of a sudden this guy, you don't know if he's jumping, if he's levitating, you don't know if he's like summoning something, if he's in a trance, if he's in a ritual dance. It can be so many things.
I want to go back to page 143, the Untamed Mind.
Goya's black paintings, that's what I was referring to. Just found it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So this one was used in the anniversary edition of Weave World for the cover.
Mm-hmm. Untamed Mind.
Yeah, really interesting. I really like that one.
It's is this a giant island, or is this just a really tiny creature living on a person's head? It's
I personally really love this piece too, and the funny thing is that Clive hates it, or at least hated it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you watch the documentary that was on the Midnight Meat Train special features, I forget what it's called, but it's where Clive is giving you a tour through his
and he talks about how the paintings are his children.
Yeah, and so he goes out, and if you watch the video, he goes out into the backyard and there's a tent set up, and he calls it the Island of the Fucked or something to that regard.
Yeah.
And he's flipping through these canvases, all of which are absolutely gorgeous, and just knowing that they're sitting out there in the elements and the weather with only a tent protecting them. Yeah. And he's flipping through and he's saying like, oh, this one's lost, oh, what the hell is this? Lost. And the Untamed Mind is one of the pieces that he deemed as being lost. Yes. Oh, and so I remember Thomas Nagovin talking about how he had to fight Clive tooth and nail to get this piece featured in Imaginary Volume 1 because Clive didn't like it, and Clive didn't see the merit in it. But Thomas did, which again goes to show, art is different and subjective for everyone, and everyone takes something different.
On my tour of the office, and then we also went through Clive's backyard, but we didn't go inside of Clive's house because he was busy writing.
Yeah.
But we went through that tent, and I flipped through some of those, and I'm like, oh my God, he's just putting these out in the yard in a tent.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, I would love so much to have one of these, and they're just...
Oh, I know. I would, yeah.
Seems like this painting was unfucked.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it got put on an anniversary edition of Weave World, so maybe Clive changed. Oh no,
it was a Great and Secret Show.
It makes you wonder.
Everville.
Everville.
That's what. It
yes, it makes you wonder what other paintings were lost.
Oh yeah.
Amazing stuff here.
159. Diathamos. So this one, I got to take a picture standing next to it with a T-shirt with this painting on my T-shirt.
That's right. I think I've seen that photo.
Yeah.
So Ethan Moss was actually one of the first paintings that I ever saw in person. This was one of the ones that was exhibited at that pop-up gallery at the Nightbreed screening that I went to.
Is this an Abarat character?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
He's the Dragon Man.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So there's so many awesome paintings here. Some of these are truly amazing.
One that I have to bring up is Christopher Carrion Resurrected on page 113. Mm-hmm. And it is my personal favorite painting that Clive has ever done.
Wow.
It's iconic, yeah. Very iconic. There's
something. I'm not a spiritual person, but there is something spiritual in it to me. Just the fact that you see Christopher Carrion, he's being resurrected, so you automatically have the allusions to the resurrection of Christ and things like that. And just
even has his hands in prayer.
Yes, he's folding his hands in prayer, but you have this skeletal like face that is just being surrounded by this metaphysical energy, and at the bottom, you just have these weird, colorful abstractions that could possibly be figures or dreams or nightmares, what have you. But it's just one of the most evocative pieces that Clive's done.
He could have called this "Rising from Hell," and it would have made just as much sense,
Yeah,
and it doesn't appear in any of the 3 Abarat books that we have so far.
Oh no, it's in Absolute Midnight. Yeah,
is it?
Yeah, that's this is when he's being resurrected on the spoiler alert for Abarat
on the shore.
Yeah, sorry, Jose, but yeah, when he's resurrected.
That's fine. I've seen the book trailer for Absolute Midnight.
So that's where that painting's from.
Yes, yeah. I agree with you. And then there's a giant detail of it, and you can see that Clive Barker uses not just a brush, not just a palette knife. He probably also uses the back of the brush just to scratch the painting. There's all these scratches.
He uses steak knives too.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Wow. I think it was the Artist Passion video. It's on YouTube. It's where he's talking about the Abarat paintings.
Yeah, he's scraping off something.
Yeah. He says, "I'm a vegetarian, so the only use that I have for steak knives is for paintings," and that's what he uses. And so that's what I actually use them for when I paint too. Is I adopted that technique, and I use steak knives in my paintings now too.
Wonderful. Yeah, and there are smaller pieces, little smaller pieces. Some of them are very abstract, like you have a father and child on 124, you have meditation on 125, and then you have fecundity on page 126. Yeah. These all seem like these just general abstractions made flesh in canvas. I have no other way of putting it, but it's so rich. I mean, once you start getting into Clive Barker's artwork, there's so much that you can discover, and there's so many feelings and ideas that he gives a body to that it's amazing.
Yeah.
Truly amazing.
On page 165, The Itch.
Oh, yes.
This one was really striking to me just because I love the way that the face is sort of the highlight and then the body kind of fades into the background.
This is one of the deluxe prints, right, that they made?
Yeah. And James Kay, the one who photographed all these paintings, I believe that he made a pair of Vans sneakers with this painting on it.
Oh, really?
With the itch on it,
love that.
Yeah, tremendous. Just the color and the way he uses color. And I think it's on the second volume of Imaginer. I might be jumping the shark here, but Clive does this amazing.
Yeah.
Clive talks a lot about color and how he uses color and what color means to each of us. And you look at this detail on page 166, 167, and you just look at this red just smeared on the canvas. It just evokes something deep inside you. It's these beautiful pigments. I mean, what the worlds you can create just with this wonderful paste of pigments and oil. It's almost magical, right? It's magic on canvas.
It really is.
Yeah. And I particularly want to bring up that, Marcus, you also paint, and you've been posting your paintings and your poems on Facebook, and it you're doing it too. I mean, you're bringing up ideas and you're bringing up feelings, and you're putting them into words and paintings, and it's wonderful to see you share that stuff out with the world.
Well, thank you so much. That really means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Ryan, the page 183, I think, at the window, wasn't this like on a book cover somewhere, or maybe on one of those art books? Do you remember seeing this?
I know that this was in Visions of Heaven and Hell.
Yeah.
Oh, that
might be where. Yeah.
That's probably where I've recognized this from, because this one seems very familiar to me.
Yeah, I know that some of these, they were used in like calendars and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Clive, I think there was two different calendars. There was just like a regular one there, and then there was an erotic calendar.
Right. And then the book ends with the afterword by Mark Miller, where he goes on to talk about, I didn't know Clive painted. Did you know?
So, yes. It's kind of a repeated refrain that's most folks don't know Clive paints.
Yeah. I guess I knew that he drew. And then, of course, since I've been collecting Clive for over 25 years, this has been 25 years, maybe more.
Yeah. But no,
it's been more than that.
He is right. I mean, but judging by the reception that the questions and stuff that I got from people, it's like a lot of people just think he made Hellraiser, and then I don't know what happened to Clive Barker.
Yeah, when we were at Texas Frightmare Weekend in 2018, we were in line for a very long time, and I had my copy of Imaginer 5 with me, and just being with fans who were waiting however many hours we waited. I remember there was one fan who asked me what I had to sign, and I showed her, and saying like, oh, these are his paintings and stuff, and she had no idea that he painted. Yeah. And these are pretty diehard fans who are going to conventions and waiting hours in line to meet Clive, and even they don't know that he paints.
Yeah.
So, and I don't want to keep repeating, but that's the one thing I miss about the galleries and stuff is just putting the paintings out. But I guess that's the one really cool thing about the Sabrina the Teenage Witch is that we have the paintings going out and being seen by the world again in a, albeit different way.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Have you watched season 3 yet?
I haven't. I haven't even finished season 1, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah.
Mark Miller kind of bookends this by saying, I'm glad that he paints because it has enriched my life. It has taught me to be a better imaginer, and it has shown me how to find inspiration wherever I look. But above all else, it's taught me that magic is real. Clive is staring directly at its bright burning bush, and the rest of us are only catching glimpses in our periphery.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that sums up exactly how I feel. I mean, Clive's work influences me every day, and that's what inspires me to try my hand at it as well.
Yeah. And then Imaginer 2 starts, and this was the first volume that I got. And I do have to thank, first of all, I have to thank Thomas and Mark for sending me a copy of Imaginer 2, which was amazing to receive this book and go through it, and I was tremendously impressed by it. And then I also want to thank Phil and Sarah for sending Ryan and myself some copies of the Imaginer book so we could actually review them and go through them. And that's one of the copies that I have here of Imaginer 1 was thankfully through Phil and Sarah. So thank you very much. But for me, I really started reading the Imaginer books on the second volume, and it's again dominated by Abarat, and it opens up with another great introduction by Thomas about the Grand Guignol and a lot of stuff about the dog company and all that stuff. I mean, if you're a big Clive Barker fan, you know all about the dog company and Doug Bradley and Phil Rimmer and Lynn Darnell.
You get very deep into that in the Memory, Prophecy, and Fantasy volumes.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I noticed that this photo on in the Grand Guignol, I guess it would be page like 220. of Clive with blonde hair next to Doug Bradley holding the little dog.
Oh, yes.
Jose, you just recently posted this on the Hellraiser movie official, right?
Official Hellraiser page, yeah. It was a picture from 1976 in the hot summer of Liverpool, and the little dog is called Anu. So Anu was the little dog that lived with the dog company in Liverpool, and that's a rare photo of Clive as a blonde. Yeah. So
and Doug Bradley had pointed out that nail board on the left side there from from Salome and the Forbidden, or from
the Forbidden.
It would be the Forbidden, not
the Forbidden.
Yeah,
that movie that they shot back in like '74 or whatever it was. So that's the first first concepts of Pinhead, then the nail board, the nails on a grid pattern and stuff. So that picture does appear here in the second volume of the Imaginer. I don't know if they got it from Doug or whatever, but it's always great to see these little candid shots of the dog company. They're all like laying on the grass here, and they all got long hair, and Doug Bradley has long hair and a beard. And
I know you would not recognize him at all if it wasn't captioned like who that is.
That's one of the nice things about the series too, especially as it moves forward with Phil and Sarah Stokes taking over, is that you get these archival photos and information and that you can't really access anywhere else.
Stuff that they brought into the little theater books that they've been putting out as well. Stuff like that. So that's a great opening with a lot of never before seen dog company pictures. And then it opens with the exhibitions, just like the first volume did. Yeah. Again, Imaginary exhibition.
This was a second exhibition, right? Or is this the one, Marcus, that you went to?
2014.
Let's see here. What page are you guys on?
There was Cinefamily. It was a Cinefamily one in Los Angeles.
Yeah. So there's a couple exhibitions. One of them is The Love and Other Violations, which is a February Valentine's Day exhibition that Century Guild did, which I didn't get to see, but it was Clive and a few other artists. Then there was also a ceremony exhibition, and I think so those are those in the parade exhibition, which those aren't the ones I attended, but and then if you flip to what page would this be?
And there's the Clive Barker 1977.
Yeah, that's the one I was trying to find the page numbers for. But that's what I'm saying is that exhibition wouldn't have happened without the Kickstarter and without the stretch.
I do remember that, yeah.
And so this is an opportunity for the public to be able to go and see drawings that Clive did in 1977 that, as far as Thomas and people who worked for Clive knew, had just been sitting in a drawer for years and no one had seen before.
Yeah.
But the next page after that was the Cinema Family.
That's an incredible looking exhibition. I love how they're sort of nestled into the plants there.
Yeah, it was really nice. It was nighttime. They had all these lights up. There were just a few paintings. I think it was just the two that they show, or maybe there was three. Then there was a couple smaller pieces, and then they had the Hellraiser Monopoly set. That's Clive's that they had for viewing.
That's right. It's like on page 242, I think, and then they also have the picture of that sculpture that you mentioned earlier, Ryan, Proteus, which was a collaboration with Jason Haidt.
And one of the ones that they don't show is they had a wall of Clive's more recent sketches, and I bought two pieces from that wall while I was there.
Wow.
But so I got to attend that. It was just the one night only thing, accompanied with the world premiere of the Nightbreed Director's Cut, and it was just a really cool pop-up gallery that I wish there were more of these.
Yeah.
Because again, I mean, I have been a Clive Barker fan for many, many years, and it wasn't until 2014 that I got to see a Clive Barker painting in person. So,
and he is selling artwork on the Phil and Sarah, Clive Barker archive site.
Yeah, but
it's not the
those,
same as walking up to them and looking at them.
Those are also smaller pieces. I mean, if we go back to Imaginer Volume 1, Mark mentions that these canvases are larger than most people's TVs. Like they're huge. They're as tall as a person.
Yeah.
And it's a scale that you don't. It's hard to grasp. Like I said, seeing those two paintings, seeing the Impasto and just seeing it just up close and in person it was really, really moving and really.
Most of these are 48 inches by 60, which is basically 5 feet on the longer side. Yeah.
And then he does triptychs, and those are so times 3 and it's really to see a Clive Barker painting in person, I think, is really overpowering, just because there's so much on the canvas, and Jose, like you said, it's magic wrought reality. It's it's wonderful. One time I think I brought this up before in a different episode, but in Portugal at this museum we had a Francis Bacon retrospective, and I was fortunate enough to go to that. And Francis Bacon paintings are enormous. They are gigantic. Yeah. And to stand in front of one of those Francis Bacon paintings and just look at that. And they also made triptychs. So
wow.
It was the first time I ever stood in front of such a giant painting that was not a Renaissance painting or, one of those typical, paintings that you see in palaces and stuff, but one that actually is more modern paintings, more modern things that kind of speak to you in different ways that are not just figurative or historical, things that bring out feelings inside you. And once you see that it's not just a matter of the style. It's not just a matter of the topography of the painting. It's the scale. The scale has a way of like making you, I wouldn't say feel small, but it makes you feel like it's
humbling.
You're standing at a portal to something. Yeah. When they're big enough that you can actually walk into.
Yeah. I mean, you juxtapose that to going to the Louvre and seeing the Mona Lisa.
Right, a tiny
Mona
little
Lisa
painting.
Person, it's tiny. It's it's almost.
You have to stand like 20 feet away from it because there's a cord, and then it's behind a protective glass that's kind of dark in itself, and it's like a big underwhelming experience.
Yeah, which and seeing a Clive Barker painting in person is the exact opposite.
Yeah.
No offense to Da Vinci.
No offense. It's a wonderful painting, but I think its reputation far outweighs the, I mean, again, art is subjective. I mean, some people will probably look at the Mona Lisa, they could stare at it for days, and be enamored with it. I feel that way about Clive Barker's art. And one of the paintings that I think, one of the first ones here that I think I have to bring up as very striking to me is on page 263 is Mater Motley.
Oh, yes.
Because that was one of the paintings I saw when they were like working on preparing for this book, and they were taking a big picture of it and color correcting the image. And I think it's a great piece of artwork, and I love this character and I love the story of it, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, it is, and it does feel really personal to say, like, I was there and I saw them scanning this thing.
Yeah, and it's strange that there's no background to it because it's just framed by white.
Yeah,
but it's not really just white when you look at the painting. It's painted over. Yeah, that area has paint on it, but it's deliberate choice by Clive just to focus on Mater Motley. Yeah, so it's a great portrait, and she's sticking out her pinky.
Mine, one that really impressed me was on 375. Let's see, it's young Christopher Carrion.
Oh, yes.
And I think just mainly from a story point of view, because I don't think we, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think we saw this painting before, right?
That's a good question.
So This is before the fire.
Yes, before the fire.
But after his grandmother sewed his lips shut.
Yes. I want to say that this is in one of the Abarat books, though. But
isn't this on Absolute Midnight or the third one? Well, the third one is Absolute Midnight.
Yeah, I
think I've seen this in
but I'm not positive.
Okay.
Isn't this in the part where he's telling Candy about how his grandmother sued his lips when the first time he said the word love?
Oh, that would have been 2 then, I think.
Or am I just associating both things in my mind? Because again, it's Clive bringing something that he wrote and figuratively, symbolically creating a painting that absolutely embodies that line.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, but it's a wonderful painting. It's like he's like, well, okay, I guess I'll never say that word again.
Yeah,
it's.
One of the ones I want to bring to light is on 283. We've already talked about it kind of because it was featured in that pop-up gallery. Mm-hmm. But Stitchling on 283. Again, that was the first Clive Barker painting that I got to see in person. And walking through the doors from the theater to the outside gallery, and that was the first thing I saw, and my jaw just kind of dropped. And it's this Lovecraftian, or maybe like underwater creature that's perched atop a mound of skulls and bones, and it's just a really pretty piece. And just it's a Stitchling, so it also has the Frankenstein connotation with it as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And before that, there's another picture here that I'm particularly stricken by. 269. So it's an untitled picture, and it's pre-2008, but it looks like a masked, like shaman, like creature, like a priest with a mask on.
Yes. This is another one that was in the tent that he said was lost.
Oh my God, really?
Yes, right?
Jesus Christ, this picture is amazing to me. This could be a Cenobite. This could be anything. It just speaks to me so much. Like, we have these festivals in Portugal that have pagan roots, okay? And so some of these festivals imply men donning outfits made out of garish colors and straw and fabric and whatever, and they put on these carved masks made out of wood painted with garish colors. And this one just looks exactly like something that you would see in one of those festivals. And to me, this screams like shaman. This screams like magic, wizard, whatever you want to say.
And yet it's so unique, because when you think of magic or wizard, or you think Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, you have a certain idea in mind, but it's such a unique piece, and that's what makes it so Barkerian. Just the uniqueness of it. Yep.
I never really went towards that whole Harry Potter thing when I think of wizards. To me, wizards involve bonfires and dancing circles.
No,
and smoke.
I just mean that Clive's art is so unique that there's no.
I get it. Yeah. And then, of course, there's the Needle Tower, which is pre-2011, and that's on page 391. And I think this ended up on a cover of the Scarlet Gospels, didn't it?
Yeah, it's on the inside of the dust jacket.
Yeah, 391. So I think I flipped that inside out, and I made the book look like that because I just like this painting so much, and it's almost like a hell landscape.
Yeah, there's another painting in here that was on the Scarlet Gospels. I don't know if it was on the actual hardback. Mm-hmm. Or if it was on the advanced reader copy.
Okay,
it's somewhere in here too. I'm not sure where. It's a big book.
One that I thought was really cool. Also, 251. This it's called the Ice Pyramid, and I don't know if "cool" is the right way to put it actually, but this one sort of boggles my mind, and I have a hard time wrapping my head around it.
Oh yeah. It's almost like almost reminds me of like Pacific Rim or something, where they're or like Power Rangers or something, where they're controlling the
Jaegers.
The Jaegers, but it's almost like he's trapped in like a snow globe.
Yeah, because it's snowing.
It's the creature's head is the snow globe.
Yeah.
So and in a way, it kind of made me think of because Clive does this a lot, where he paints something where there's something on somebody's head that's got another guy trapped inside of it, like the fish bowls, that that are people's hats and stuff like that.
Right. And it looks like a mechanical body.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. Maybe that's what it is. But it makes me think of the imagination and things born out of imagination.
Well, it also has a bit of melancholy to it, because you have this creature who is trapped in a snow globe, so that's going to keep him alive, because in the outside elements is a volcano that's spewing lava and ash into the air.
Oh yeah.
And what the mechanical arm is holding a flower that he can't touch.
Yeah. Wow, that's a good point.
So you have that aching of not being able to touch nature because you're trapped in an environment that's keeping you seemingly alive. I don't know. That's a really good choice.
That is the beauty of these paintings. It means something different to each one of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the ones I want to bring up is a painting that I've only ever seen in Imaginer. It's on a 371, and it is an entitled piece, and it's of an androgynous character standing amidst a dark forest.
Oh,
and
okay. Yeah.
And when I was looking, I was going to purchase a painting from Clive, and I was sent a selection, and this was one of the ones that I was really debating of buying, just because I'd never seen it before, and there was something it's just different than what I feel like Clive usually does, because the character, they seem almost transparent in that you can see the forest through them.
Yeah.
But in negative.
In them it's the reverse. The forest is white and full of life, and the blue and white, and on the outside it's almost like these prison bars of just this silhouetted dark forest with a hint of maybe dawn on the horizon. But the most striking part is you have this bluebird coming out of their head, floating off into the freedom of the sky. It's a really, really unique piece in that, as far as I know, you can only see this piece in Imaginer.
Yeah,
and
I don't think I've ever seen it before.
Yeah,
and there's a bird emerging from the head and flying away in the act of flight. And I want to bring up this story. You guys know Laurie Anderson? Laurie Anderson is a performer. She was married to Lou Reed. She's made a lot of spoken word albums and stuff like that.
Oh, I don't think so.
She has an album that has a very interesting story about the soul and birds, which is called actually "The Soul Is a Bird." It's a story when she went in 1984 to Bali to talk to the Prince of Ubud, and they were going to have these. It was a press tour she was doing in Japan, and these conversations were going to be made into a book, and she was going to represent the Western world. The prince was going to represent the Southern world, and the Japanese press representative was going to represent whatever was left.
Yeah.
And so they were talking about all sorts of stuff like cars and, culture. And at some point, the Prince of Bali said to Laurie Anderson, "Would you like to see the cremation tapes of my father?" And so they started watching these tapes. And in Bali, apparently, when the king died, they started making this giant bonfire to cremate the body of the king. And so they make this really rickety, tower of sticks, and then they place the sarcophagus of the king on the top of it. And then once they light it up, it starts burning, and immediately, it comes towering down, and the body of the king falls down to the ground with a thud, and everybody immediately starts cheering in the tape and the video. And so the reason why they were cheering is because the Balinese, they believe that the soul is a bird, and that when the body falls, it shakes the bird loose and gives it a head start on its way to heaven.
That's beautiful.
Isn't it? I particularly like that one. Really, that story is really beautiful.
Yeah. When you brought up music, another song that the painting reminded me of personally was from David Bowie's last album, Black Star, the song Lazarus. And, he made that album knowing that it was going to be the last thing that he was making, because he knew that he had terminal cancer. And, in the song he talks about a bluebird being able to fly off and be free.
Yeah.
And, just the fact that it's named Lazarus, so you have that idea of, resurrection and being free of death. Yeah.
And he, it's the thing that Bowie did with this album is he actually, artistically, he left on his own terms. Not many artists get to make a send-off, make a goodbye album. Even a few days before he died, he had pictures taken of himself, dressed in a suit and by this photographer friend. Mm-hmm. And he's just laughing. He's got a hat on. He's got shoes. He's got a nice, cool-looking suit. And he's just like – and that was just a few days before, he died.
Yeah.
So, performer until the end.
Yeah. Another painting or another series of paintings I wanted to bring to light is on page 319. Mm-hmm. It's three separate pieces of three demons. They're each titled demons, but it's almost like they're like chaotic lava lamp monsters, just because the use of the colors. So it just reminds me of like a crazy acid trip. But it's just these three pieces are prime examples that Clive's use of the knife is just as important as the brush, if not more, just because the scratches that he implements within the paint it's just as important as the paint itself.
Yeah.
And it's just as present as the paint itself.
Yeah, the texture is part of the demon's anatomy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah, the hairs coming out of the demons are done by the scratches of the knife.
Yeah,
that is a brilliant example of his mastery of the knife. Yeah, that's right. Very flowy and very. The knife kind of guides the paint into this texture that makes it come to life.
Yeah. Another piece is on 345, titled The Golden Warrior, which, if anyone wants a peek into the later Abarat books, as far as I know, this is supposed to be Cry. I remember that Clive had posted on Facebook or Twitter, like 2013, years ago, that this was going to be Cry in the later books. And he actually, And he actually had a statue in his house that was the model for this painting.
He had a name. He had a different name for that, didn't he? I forgot.
Did he?
I forgot the name that he called it.
Maybe the person just wielded the power of the cry. Something to that regard.
Yeah. I'll have to, if I remember that, I'll let you know. But
okay.
I think I remember the statue had a name. Anyway, that's another beautiful painting here. He's missing a bit, right? He's missing a couple of bits. He's missing part of his mind and he's missing part of his chest.
Yeah.
So you have
a man that's half made up, half fashioned.
Yeah. It looks like almost like a cry for help, a cry of helplessness, maybe, because a warrior can't do much without his arms.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Looks like he went into a fight and the cannonballs ripped a chunk out of him.
Right through through his torso.
There's one here that I also want to bring up. That's the last one I have. It's the Saint in the Briars. Let's see, which page is that?
Yes, I love that piece. That's one of the ones I had marked. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I forgot which page it is. I'm trying to flip it through.
Oh, I got it. It's 325.
325, thank you. Yeah, that painting is particularly striking to me as well. It's he's just sitting down and he looks like very monkish in his almost like a Buddhist monk almost. Yeah. And then he's got these vines growing out of his body, or maybe through him, but I think they're growing out of his body, and it just seems very ascetic.
And when you look at the close up on the next page, just seeing the trails of paint coming out of him, it almost looks like a special effects wound, just because the texture is so great. And then that bright red just really screams of like a painful wound. It's really beautifully done.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite.
And he's got some ochre yellow on his forehead and around his face as well, and his ears.
With these dark, pitiless eyes that have no irises, no light. It's just almost hollow.
Yeah, I love this painting just because it seems like he seems to be at peace. At the same time, these red vines are growing out of his body, and again, it's something that you need to look at for a while and just let your imagination run free and come up with different ideas about what this means to you. You shouldn't look at a painting trying to figure out why is this happening? What does this mean? You should just look at it and try to think, what is this bringing up in me? What is, how does this make me feel? It's like it's wrong sometimes when people look at a movie and try to make sense of a movie, or look at a work of art and try to make sense of a work of art. Sometimes there's no sense. It's like it's not meant to convey a text or a message that you can like confine in like a sentence. Sometimes it's about a feeling. It's about what it evokes in you. Yeah. It's not just about he's trying to say this and that, and it symbolizes this and that because he did this and that. It's like, that's kind of like a clinical way of going towards like a painting or a piece of artwork. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people do that. And for example, last episode we talked about Jordan Peele's Candyman. And one particular movie that I think people try to do that a lot is Us. People try to say, well, how did they live underground, and who made all those outfits and all those scissors?
It's a movie that you can't pour logic into.
It's not supposed to be like, it's a metaphor.
It's an allegory.
Symbolism. Yeah, it's an allegory. It's like a Twilight Zone episode. Yeah. It's like, the guy in the Twilight episode is surrounded by books, and then he steps on his glasses, and it ends like that, and people are like, oh, no, he's never going to read again. He could just walk into a store and get another set of glasses. It's about what that means to him at the moment. It's about his loneliness and being like alone in the world where he's the only. So, that's one of the things that sometimes
sorry, go ahead.
No, sometimes people just try to make sense of a piece of art, and sometimes you just need to let it take you on a ride.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes from Clive is in that Midnight Meat Train special features that's on YouTube. And Clive is talking about how you have to give your guts to it, and your heart to it, and your balls to it, and literally everything to art, or else it's not worth a damn.
Right.
And he goes on to say that the enemy of art is the question why.
Yeah.
Because art, if it is art, is the answer. You shouldn't have to give an answer. The art should be the answer. And if the art isn't giving an answer, then the art, isn't art.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the Saint of the Briars, you can come up with all sorts of things. Like if you know about the holy men in India, for example, the men who decide to sit on a corner in the dirt, just wearing a piece of cloth, and then they just make a vase out of their hand, and they put a little plant there, and they let the plant grow, and they stay like that for years. And, their nails grow so much that they go back into his hand and like go through the flesh. Mm-hmm. And like these men that decide that I'm just going to walk on all fours, and I'm just going to sit on a corner of the street, and I'm just going to meditate, and I'm just going to, raise my arm until my arm shrivels and becomes half of my other arm. And it's like, it's just this idea of asceticism. These people who they want to transcend their bodies, and they want to achieve a different consciousness by just not doing what everybody else does.
Yeah.
So the Saint of the Briars, it seems like his body is sprouting these like red vines. Are they fed by his body? Are they part of his spirit? Are they a manifestation of something else? Who knows? It's, that's why he's a saint.
Yeah. The last painting that I'll bring up is on page 349, and it's Jimothi Tarrie, who I guess is the leader of the Tarrie cats.
Yeah.
And the main reason why I bring it up is because there is a really cool mask that is on Etsy that's available for sale that was done by the artist Tate Steinsek.
Oh yeah, from Face Off.
Yeah, he was on Face Off, and I believe that didn't he win the Clive Barker challenge? And
I think so, with Mark Miller.
Yeah,
and he did some concept art for Michael Plumides'
Nightbreed.
Nightbreed.
Oh, I
TV
didn't
show.
know that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Like the Pelican that's wearing the leather jacket and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, he has two really cool things on his shop. One of them is a bronze bust of Clive, and it's really, really beautiful. But it's $1,300, so it's for a serious collector. But I guess the only other person that owns one is Clive. But the other thing he has is the Jimothi Tarrie cat mask, and it's really, really cool. If anyone wants to check that on Etsy.
Cool.
He's got a Bebop and Rocksteady masks as well. I don't know if you guys see it, but yeah, I'll put a link there.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so that's Imaginer 2, and then it ends with this wonderful text afterward by Phil and Sarah Stokes, right?
Yeah, and Clive Barker talking about color with Phil and Sarah.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is he says, "Any color is like a lover's name," he mused one evening with us, rubbing the paint between his fingers. "It embodies this huge wealth of content. Some of that is shared, of course. Red is alarm and passion, whoever you are. But there's so much that is individual to us, a memory of a time and place, the way the light hit the sky on a particular day."
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's absolutely right. And then they go on to mention, things like he's talking about greens that remind him of the smell of grass being cut, and certain grays that reminds him of a thunderhead, thunderhead clouds. And that's, for most of us who don't draw or paint or whatever, this is almost meaningless, but in some way, each one of us has some ideas that come when you look at a color. You look at blue, you think of the sky, or you think of the summer, or you think of the ocean if you live near the ocean. For some people, blue is going to be something else. It's going to be Blue's Clues or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, even talks about the different hues, and I think he says that he was mixing colors and he made one hue, and if he could bottle it and mix it again, that they could all retire because he'd be rich off that color.
They have a little kind of almost poem here at the end. And Phil and Sarah, I think they're actually American. I think they're from California. They just moved to London.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, I think they're American, and then they just live in London now. But they have this little text here at the end that says, "Color is emotion, color is violence, color is love, color is embracing, color is comfort, color is complexity." And again, looking at these paintings, that makes total sense.
There's one last quote I'd like to share. It's he says, quote, "I came late to color, having felt wholly inadequate at understanding the theory of it. But now, having realized the theory doesn't matter, that it's instinct that drives the choices, I wallow in color."
Yeah.
And his paintings are so colorful. That's one of the first things I realized when I started seeing paintings by Clive Barker back on the old Lost Souls website.
Yeah.
Because I lived in Portugal, I didn't get a chance to go visit any exhibits from Clive. So whatever I saw through the internet. And, those exhibitions that he would do, and we would see pictures on the website. And that was the first thing that strikes you immediately is how colorful Clive's paintings are.
Yeah.
How primal, primary colors, and then everything in between. It's beautiful. It's just beautiful. And
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, like Phil and Sarah, looking at his paintings fascinates me, enchants me, and dominates our ongoing journeys with the creator.
Yeah. He even says that, he just dismisses color theory, that he just goes with his gut and what he thinks is right. And his choices of color, I think, is really what makes his paintings really evocative. It's an alchemy on the canvas, and it's a beautiful thing to see. And that's why I love these books.
And Phil and Sarah say that these paintings evoke memories that will last with us to our final breaths, and we trust implicitly well beyond. I hope so. I really do. I would love that the afterlife would be to move into the heaven that you've created in your head. And I think for my heaven, I would love to go into these worlds that Clive Barker creates. That would be that'd be a wonderful way of moving into eternity.
I completely agree.
Well, so this was Imaginer 1, which came out in 2014, and Imaginer 2 that came out in 2015, both by Century Guild. And I believe that in Imaginer 2, right, was after the Kickstarter was over, I think Phil and Sarah kind of took over duty of shipping them out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of when the changeover took place.
Yeah.
Right at the end, after the book was kind of made, which is why that they have the afterword in there, I think.
Yeah.
And, so coming up soon, we will be continuing our A to Z commentaries from Clive Barker's A to Z of Horror. We'll be talking about B is for Beelzebub and moving on to Exorcist III commentary. And that'll be, we're going to have a news episode next. And then right after that, the next week, we'll have Exorcist III commentary. And Marcus, you might be able to join us. And David had said that maybe he could also. And Ed Martinez.
Yeah, that'd be a really fun one.
Yeah. And then at some point, we're also going to be getting back to Abarat 3. And we'll continue the Imaginer series.
I'm looking at the Jimothi Tarrie mask that costs $300, made out of latex. I fucking want one.
I know, it's awesome, right?
Yeah,
I want one. Holy crap, this is amazing.
So much money for a mask.
Oh, it's
really
from
amazing.
Tulsa, Oklahoma. God damn, that's good.
I know.
Wow, he even made like the collar of the shirt and everything. So.
And the whiskers and everything.
Oh my God,
Beautiful.
Imagine this. Yeah, definitely. Let's put this on the show notes.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us for this beautiful discussion of Clive Barker's art, Marcus.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This was really, really fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marcus.
Oh, thank you.
It's great to have you here and have your insights. Sometimes words fail me. I'm not really a guy who can talk a lot about art and make deep analysis on it. But you started doing reviews for Imaginer, I think, since volume 4 and 5.
Yeah, I did 4 and 5.
And so those were always a pleasure to read. I hope that you will one day make the volume 6 and 7. And let's reconvene for Imaginer 3 and 4.
Sounds wonderful.
All right. And this podcast, having no beginning, will have no end.
You can find the show notes for this episode and join the discussion over at www.clivebarkercast.com. We've got an archive of past episodes, news, features, and reviews, along with all the ways you can connect with us. You can subscribe on every other place you can find podcasts. Share your thoughts with us, and share our podcast with your friends. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial podcast and news blog that's not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Inc. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans.
Thanks for listening.